Hi, my name is Jen Kerner, and the topic that I'm going to be covering this week is on the use of materials and equipment in the classroom. Let's first start off by talking about what the research says. Across various grade levels, it's been shown that classrooms with rules and procedures have fewer issues with classroom disruptions than classrooms that do not have these rules and procedures in place. In fact, Marzano notes that there are 28% fewer distractions in rooms with rules and procedures. This, of course, comes as no surprise to people who have been teaching for very long. However, it is worth noting that this reduction in distraction can carry over into materials and equipment. These are ripe opportunities for kids to misunderstand expectations or exploit the lack of procedures, and this can set up the opportunity for students to act out. It's not enough to simply say that there is a procedure in place. The students have to be taught and they have to practice what the procedures are in order for these to be effective. This often involves repeated situations where the teacher is explaining how supplies are used and how they are obtained. Student involvement can be helpful for getting student buy-in and eliciting desired results from students on a regular basis. I feel like teachers generally feel as though elementary students require more rules for usage of materials, and then they can kind of ease off of those rules as they get older. But Marzano suggests just the opposite, and I think that comes from a place of the ability to understand a longer list of expectations. He recommends having around 7 rules regarding class expectations, including materials and their usage, for secondary kids, and only 5 to 8 for the elementary kids. Okay, material management is of course different at different grade levels. Elementary students are primarily going to be concerned with distributing materials, collecting them, storing common materials, how student desks are organized, how drinking fountains and washrooms are utilized, how and when students can access the sink and pencil sharpeners. Secondary is going to focus primarily on just the distribution, collection, and storage of materials. Okay, so let's start with distributing materials. Having labels of where materials are stored will help not only for when you're gathering materials for use, but also will help your students return them properly when they're done. When conducting hands-on activities, it's useful to have a labeled group bin where the teacher has gathered all the supplies to be used by the group. Teachers can select captains, and the captains can help teachers distribute and return supplies. At the elementary level, this can be as simple as picking up supplies that you have already sorted into group bins, and older students can actually help gather those supplies from their original or permanent location, put them into bins, and then help return them when they are no longer needed. Posters outlining what procedures are to be followed and how supplies should be organized when they're no longer being used are useful, especially for older students who have more access to supplies. Having a manner in which you can check that students and captains are following the procedures is useful. Marzano references a teacher at the secondary level using a meme or a comic that covers up the procedures poster. And if the captain doesn't mention that meme, the teacher knows that they haven't been referencing the poster and need reminded what their responsibilities as captain are. So it's a nice kind of low stakes way for the teacher to determine what rules are being followed and which ones need to be revisited. Also, you need to take the time to plan out how you want your students to access the materials and remain consistent throughout the year for the best results. Here I have a picture of how I distribute materials for my 6th grade class. You can see that they're rather worn. They're getting used up quite a bit. But I gather supplies into the bins, and then kids come and pick up the bin with their group's number on it. They're really easy. They're made out of paper box lids, and I have just a cart that I found lying around the school. In the past, I've used those cheap shower caddies that you can get at Target or baskets, and I've accomplished that same goal there, to have everything organized so that they're easy to access for the kids. Okay, collecting materials. You want to have a collection spot for papers to be collected. for each subject area in the elementary classroom. Classroom helpers can be in charge of picking up papers from each student, or students can be required to turn papers in on their own. A helper can then paperclip the papers together by assignment. Have a designated location for notes that are from home, permission slips, etc. This makes sure that important communication between parents and teachers are always getting into the right spot. Be consistent in your collection of work via technology. Sites like Google Classroom are a reliable and easy way for kids to submit assignments, and this helps negate the "but I already turned that in" argument when missing work comes up. Okay, having bins labeled yours, mine, and ours is a great way to help young students understand what items they have access to and which they don't. Individual materials kept out for students, for the student, him or herself, are labeled yours. Ours labels the materials that are shared, like glue sticks or crayons, and mine are the off-limit materials that the teacher wants to keep for him or herself. Picture labels help young learners and ELL students know what items go where, and labels help students of all ages understand where an item belongs. Organization is key and helps kids know how to keep the room in working order and how to keep track of shared classroom supplies. Okay, just the odds and ends. This is primarily for the elementary students, but there are things that can be used here for middle and upper students as well. Let students know what is allowed in their desks and what is not. My school uses expandable folders for 6th grade students, and that is all that is allowed in their desks. All supplies like pencils and markers are placed in a bin near where their coats hang, and keeping desks routinely organized encouraging students to recycle items that are no longer needed helps keep things in the location where they belong. Specific guidelines for when students are allowed to use the washroom or get a drink is imperative. Elementary classrooms may have scheduled times that they stick to, while middle and high school students will be directed to use the facilities during passing periods. For my class, which is 6th grade in an elementary school, my students take a pass and place it on their desk when they need to use the washroom. They're able to do this without asking, but have instructions on when it's appropriate to do this. Transition times and work times are allowed, but in the middle of instruction is only allowed during emergencies. Pencil sharpeners also require rules so that the usage of the sharpener doesn't interrupt instruction. Many teachers sharpen pencils at the beginning of the day for students to swap out at designated locations. This is when the pencils are part of a shared supply. Others only allow pencils to be sharpened during transition times. Personally, I highly encourage the use of mechanical pencils and have those listed on my supply list instead of the regular pencils that require sharpening. Managing technology is a new area that gives many teachers headaches. How do we manage something that's so easy to distract and so difficult to see? This is especially tricky for one-to-one schools. To manage the physical location of the devices is key. Keep the devices at a separate location rather than storing in student desks. Only allow the use of devices when it is academically required, and this can be a charging station or a parking lot. Managing what the students access online is trickier but not impossible. Apple Classroom allows students to have instant access to what students are viewing on their Apple devices in real time. This also allows teachers to block pages, redirect student pages, and view a student's browser history all from the teacher's Apple device. Apple Manager is a means by which teachers and districts can limit what apps students have access to. Rather than have an Apple ID and full access to the App Store, Apple Manager has a predetermined, pre-approved list of apps that student can access. This protects them from accessing apps that are highly distracting or inappropriate. Guided access allows students to lock a student into a particular page. This is useful during exams or for students who struggle to stay on task for assignments. Apple also allows teachers to restrict what specific apps and web pages are allowed on an individual device. This page is protected by a teacher-guided or generated passcode. Okay, executive functioning is something that students often don't fully develop until they're in their late teens or 20s. And according to Elaine Tan-Camo, the majority of students are visual learners. Having visual cues to remind students of expected use of materials is a great way to avert misbehaviors regarding materials and help them develop routines around their placement. Organization of student materials is just as important as the organization of classroom materials. And having students keep and maintain an agenda of some kind to manage their assignment is also useful in helping them stay on task and reduces frustration in regard to missing assignments or missed opportunities to write down what they've learned. Okay, here are the references. One was an executive functioning page. One was for safety in the elementary science classroom, the Marzano book we have for class, and then also one for tips for passing out and collecting papers at the elementary level. Thanks so much for listening.